Sail better, sail further, sail faster. Part 2. Well, we all know that adage, 2 boats in the water, it's a race. But it's great when you catch someone up. It's also great when you overtake them. And, eventually, make the mark. But this isn't about racing. This is about cruising. This is about getting more out of your boat, making it sail faster, better, and further. Last time we looked at named parts of the sails and some parts of the rig on a typical boat with triangular sails. We also looked at windward side and leeward side and starboard tacks and port tacks, and we looked at how an aeroplane wing is very similar to a sail. This time we're going to look at points of sail. We're also going to look at how apparent wind affects you on those different points of sail. If you haven't watched part 1, we'd suggest you go back and watch it first, or this might not make sense. There's a link to part 1 in the description. Even the most modern sailboats can't get from point A to point B if they're sailing directly into the wind. They have to tack, like here. First starboard tacks and then port tacks, or the other way round. Some modern boats can get very close to sailing directly into the wind, but not actually into it. But they can sail at an angle to the wind. Sailing very close to the wind is often called a beat. Sailing at 90 degrees to it, a reach. And sailing downwind is called a run. Now, different countries have slightly different names for these, and of course different angles to the wind are broken down into different sailing terms, but generally all around the world we use roughly the same terms for sailing at different points to wind. Let's look at these points of sail in more detail. If we're heading directly into wind, in the UK we'd say we were luffed up, the wind is on our nose. In the United States they say they're in irons. Both these terms mean the same thing. The wind is passing over the sails so that they do not generate any lift and therefore no forward driving force. Moving clockwise on our diagram, the next point of sail is called close hauled. That's on a beat. That's as close as your boat can sail to the wind without losing any forward momentum or forward driving force. The next point of sail is a close reach, followed by a beam reach, a broad reach. All of these will have the wind coming over your port side. You'll be on a port tack. Then, from a broad reach, you start to run. Now you can run with both sails up, just the head sail, or just the main. You can also use downwind sails. Once you get to about 85 degrees of apparent wind, you can use a cruising chute. Or you could do something like run twin head sails. Now we'll be talking about downwind sailing and special sails later in the series, but let's move on for now. From a run, you'll then be going back on a broad reach, a beam reach, close reach and close hauled. On a starboard tack, there are 2 ways you can change direction, either by tacking or jibing. I'll be covering those a bit later on. Now, at all points of sail, the apparent wind will come apparently from a different direction, although the true wind will stay the same. Your boat speed will also change. Let's look closer at this. Last time we looked at boat speed and apparent wind speed. We only covered this very basically, and you'll remember I left you with a bit of a quandary about how the wind speed and apparent wind will change at different points of sail. Let's look at that in more detail. Now in this diagram I've used exactly the same points of sail, and I have added the wind speed, the apparent wind speed and the boat speed. Now, if you look at the blue arrow at the very top at 12 o'clock, you'll see that for argument's sake, I'm saying that the boat will do 5 meters per second when it's going forward into wind. This is for illustration purposes only. Obviously, we can't sail directly into wind. Now, somewhere between a beam reach and a broad reach will be your boat's fastest point of sail. Let me put another diagram up over the top of this one to explain. This diagram is actually for our boat, and you'll see at 16 knots of true, our best speed is 8.46 knots. But different boats will vary at their best point of sail. Some will be closer to a beam reach and some closer to a broad reach. Now this depends entirely on your boat, your rigging, how it's set up, the hull shape and lots of other factors. But the important thing is, in order to sail better and faster and further, you need to know what this optimum point of sail is and what speed you should be doing at different speeds of wind. Now you may be lucky enough to have a polar diagram for your boat, but if you haven't got either of these, don't worry. Hopefully by the end of this series you'll be able to build your own polar diagram, or at least know your best point of sail. Okay, let's get back to our apparent wind diagram. Now if you look at these 3 points, here, here and here, thank you, you'll see that the wind direction, or true wind, stays constant. The apparent wind changes. Look at the red arrow and see how the apparent wind actually changes both in speed and in direction. Now the apparent wind will also change according to the speed of your boat, and it's getting your head round where the apparent wind is that will allow you to sail that much better. Modern instrumentation allows you to have on a display where your apparent wind is. Some autopilots allow you to steer to that apparent wind, and that is a great advantage. Oh really? Why's that, I hear you say? Well, if you know the optimum angle that your boat sails at, and it's roughly in the direction you want to go, you can set your boat to steer at the apparent wind angle and then trim your sails precisely to achieve that optimum speed. And as you can see, I've overlaid our diagram over the top of the point of sail diagram, and now I can see what the optimum speeds at any point of sail are for our boat. Now obviously I don't have these two diagrams kicking around in our cockpit, but what I do have is I have a table of speeds and angles for different wind speeds, and that allows me to trim the sails to their optimum, or at least know what the optimum is and what I'm aiming for. That way at any point of sail I'm able to get the best out of the boat. Setting the autopilot to steer to the apparent wind angle of the direction I want to go allows me to then focus on trimming the sails to get to that optimum. And with some very simple trigonometry and a very quick speed and distance calculation, you're actually able to steer in slightly the wrong direction but get to point B quicker because your boat speed overall has been faster. We'll do more on the numbers and calculations a bit later in the series. But now I think it's time for us to have a summary, don't you? We now know that head to wind is luffed up or in irons. We know what a beat is, a reach is and a run. We know when we're close hauled, when we're at close reach, on a beam reach, a broad reach or a run. We know that the boat has an optimum speed for each angle of wind and its strength. We know that the apparent wind angle and the apparent wind speed will change according to what the boat's doing. Knowing what these values are is important, and we'll see that later on. So that's 10 minutes of me wittering on. If you've missed something, just go back to the beginning of the video and watch it again. That's what these summary points are for. In part 1 I explained how an aircraft wing works exactly the same as a sail, more or less. There's drive force, lift, sail force, heeling force and drag. It's the extra distance that the air flowing over the top of the aerofoil section has to go that creates suction or lift. Let's look at this in a bit more detail. You'll remember that what we said was that moving the clew of the sail fore or aft creates a bigger or smaller curve in the sail, and that drag was an important factor in this curvature. The depth of this sail is literally called the sail's draft. The distance from the leading edge or luff of the sail to the leach of the sail or its trailing edge is called the chord. Obviously, on a triangular sail, the distance between the leach and the luff changes up the sail, or its chord length changes. But again, we'll do more about that later. A flatter sail will give little lift but less drag. A fuller sail with more depth will give more lift, however, it will also give more drag. Changing the depth and the position of the draft has a big effect on the sail's lift. And so, the draft position in percent is equal to the chord length times 100. There's a little formula at the bottom there, but just so that you know, the position of the draft is very important. Okay, summary time again. Moving the clew fore and aft creates more or less lift. The depth of the sail is called its draft. The luff to the leach is called its chord. A flat sail gives less lift and less drag. A fuller sail, more lift but more drag. The position of the maximum draft of the sail is very important. So why would the position of the draft be important? Well, I'm going to tell you that next time, but here's a clue. It's got a lot to do with the angle to the apparent wind you're sailing at, and the speed of that apparent wind. It also has to do with the angle of attack, all of which we've already covered. We make these videos for you, for your entertainment, to help you not to make the same mistakes that we've made. We are now sailing around the world pretty slowly, but to keep making these videos we need support from patrons and from you on YouTube. So if you enjoy our videos, then subscribe. Only 28% of people that watch our videos subscribe. So hit that button in the corner. Give us a thumbs up. Or if you don't like what we're doing, give us a thumbs down and tell us why in the comments. Or you could become a Patreon. And Patreons get loads of extra scenes, extra edits and special information about us and where we are and what we're doing. It'd be really great if you joined the Patreon crew. It's as little as $3 a month, less than the cost of a decent cup of coffee. So join the Patreon crew. There's a link in the description, or you can visit our website www.svimpavidus.com, where you'll find lots of blogs, articles, technical stuff and some downloads as well that might be useful. Another thing you can do is to share our videos with your friends on Facebook, on Instagram or by email even. It really helps us. Thanks for watching. Sail safe.